Welcome. I'm looking forward to this edition. I'm kind of special. I don't know. This edition of the Houston Roundball Review presents Let's Talk Houston Rockets. I am Kris Gardner, owner of the Houston Roundball Review, and joining me this evening is the domestic traveler.
Domestic traveler, that's my
Mr.
title.
Jackson Gatlin of Locked On Rockets, Locked On NBA, back from Brooklyn. The NBA draft was in Brooklyn, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, sir.
How you doing, my man?
Man, I think I'm still a little bit jet lagged from the travel. I don't travel often, Chris, and so when I do, it messes with my whole schedule. But I guess I might be even more exhausted from the last 24 hours of NBA news, NBA free agency, all the insanity that is this time of year every year, and we have a lot of stuff to talk about as it relates to the Houston Rockets. Man, they've been busy for better or for worse.
Yeah, and you're busy with the Rockets, and I was doing stuff with UH in the Big 12 and Rice with with the American also today. So I barely got this little one slide I put together right before we started. So and this is from your tweet, so I just put it together. Let me put it right here. We can talk about it. We got a lot to talk about. This is right thus far, I believe, right? It hasn't changed the last 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever.
It hasn't, other than they also dealt KJ Martin.
Oh, I don't know. Oh, yeah, I don't have that then. Yeah,
Because I had one that was like a so far tweet, and I've got a second one that's like an updated version. Trust me, because I was sitting here thinking, man, like trying to keep track of it all. I needed a paper trail to be able to figure out what was happening. But yeah, so far this looks pretty correct here. Fred VanVleet, 3 years, $130 million. I did find out that the third year is a team option, which is huge for that contract. So that was a really important piece of news that we got. Dillon Brooks, 4 years, $80 million, all fully guaranteed. So that one's a bit concerning.
Yep, definitely. For sure.
Jock Landale, 4 years, $32 million. Only the first year guaranteed. And I was able to confirm it is it's not using the MLE at all. It's actually out of the Rockets available salary cap. So there isn't some big move coming down the pipeline. Unfortunately, there's not like another big splashy move that the Rockets are going to make. This is more or less looking like it's going to be it. So then Patty Mills from the Nets, the draft rights to Alpha Kaba, and then I believe, KJ Martin to the Clippers for a couple second-round picks.
Yeah, then add those as well, KJ and Jacob also. So to the Rockets to send out. So yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, we got a lot of folks here lined up watching us on YouTube. Where do you want to start, man? You want to start with the good one, the good news first, or with the FVV signing? And I like the team option in third year, or the concerning 4-year guarantee to Dillon Brooks.
Let's go with the positivity first, because I do think that I think that some of the wind has been taken out of Rockets fans' sails here with the moves that were made today. And I don't want that to overshadow how much of an excellent deal Fred VanVleet is, the value that they got him for, especially with that third year being a team option. This was an excellent get for this Rockets team. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for the belated birthday wishes. Look, guys, point guard was an absolute position of need for this Houston Rockets team.
No doubt.
Experimented with Kevin Porter Jr. For the past couple seasons, and they have been very transparent about the fact that was going to come to an end this offseason unless something went terribly wrong. Ime Udoka wanted to bring in a veteran guard. And I know that a lot of the reporting, a lot of the rumors looked like it was going to be James Harden. And for what it's worth, there was absolutely interest on both sides. The Rockets wanted to bring James Harden back. James Harden wanted to come back to Houston. I think that move was actually being pushed for internally quite a bit by Rafael Stone more than anybody else. And Ime Udoka, the vision that he has for this team, didn't exactly include James Harden. He's a guy who he was on the assistant coaching staff in Brooklyn when Harden was there as part of the Nets Big Three. And whatever he saw there, I think, Ime came in and really started throwing his weight around very, very quickly about some of the decisions that this organization was going to make moving forward into free agency to establish the foundation of this team that he's going to have control of for the next few years, his vision, his identity for this team. And James Harden didn't match that vision. And I honestly respect that from Ime for,
Yes, definitely.
being committed to his vision and what he wants to do culture wise here in Houston. The guy that did match that vision, though, was Fred VanVleet, a guy with proven championship experience, has played a variety of different roles for that Toronto Raptors team over the last few years. He's come off the bench. He's been a super sub. He's been a starter. He's been a primary guy for them. He's been second, third fiddle behind guys like Kawhi Leonard and Kyle Lowry. He has kind of played every role imaginable on the floor. He's a guy that you can deploy either as your primary ball handler and primary facilitator, a guy who can run your offense and do a good job of it. He's also a guy that you can play more off ball, right? Which fits in and blends in beautifully with what the Houston Rockets have in guys like Jalen Green, like Alperen Sengun, like Amin Thompson, who they just drafted. So you've got 2 years guaranteed of a guy that brings a lot to the table. I know that his percentages, a lot of other NBA fans and fan bases have been trying to clown the Rockets for this signing. There's that running joke that the Rockets paid him more money than his field goal percentage this past season. Great. That's all cool. But, he had a down year shooting the basketball. I'm not going to hide that. That's just facts. But historically, he's been a really, really solid, highly productive player. And the Rockets should be thankful and excited that they got him on the deal that they got him on.
And I was going to play devil's advocate because that's part of what I do here with the Rocket fans on the show regarding Fred's effective field goal percentage. It's not ideal. It's not great. He took a lot of threes with Toronto. But his defense, his assist totals, his toughness, his leadership, a lot more pros and cons to Fred as a basketball player. And I think it's a good move. I'm really glad to hear you mention the team option on the third year. I'm not concerned about the money part of it because everybody knows who follows you, follows me. The Rockets had to reach the salary floor, so they had to spend it by the start of the regular season. So why not give it to a guy who's going to help change the culture? A lot of questions here. Let me go with this one. Questions and comments. Let's get into right here regarding Patty Mills. This one surprises me because how does this impact, in your opinion, Amin Thompson and his minutes at the 1?
I think Patty Mills, first off, I think the Rockets actually wound up not giving up anything for Patty Mills. I think it was simply just a salary cap relief move for the Nets. So it basically got Patty Mills for free. And it's important to remember that teams, especially now with the new CBA implications coming in, the penalties, all of that, there are going to be a lot of teams looking for simply salary cap relief. That has always in the NBA landscape been an asset. If you can give a team, if you can offload a contract to another team, then sometimes in a situation like this, the Rockets might have also even been given an asset or two, right? A second round draft pick or something like that. But, it just means that they liked Patty Mills as a player. They were willing to absorb Patty Mills into their open salary cap space. And I do think that was probably one of the pivot moves that was made in the aftermath of things not working out with Brook Lopez. Unfortunately, the Rockets were really trying to pry him away from the Milwaukee Bucks. Things looked pretty promising on that front. And then ultimately Brook Lopez and the Bucks came to an agreement on a deal that he felt comfortable with. And my assumption is that the Rockets were offering him somewhere in the realm of the deal that he got with the Bucks, essentially 2 years, $48 million. And I guess what probably happened is the Rockets put that offer on the table. Brook Lopez took that offer back to Milwaukee and said, hey, Houston's offering me this. I'd rather stay here in Milwaukee, but it's really hard to turn my nose up at 2 years, $48 million, either match it or I'm going to Houston, and basically used Houston as leverage. But there was interest on both sides of that deal for sure. And the Rockets were really close to actually securing Brook Lopez. But when that went away, they kind of had to pivot, and they made a series of moves in the pivot for when they were pivoting away from Brook Lopez. And a bunch of those moves included some of the, or I should say, a bunch of the moves that they've made, including some of their young pieces like Ty Washington, like Josh Christopher, like Usman Garuba. Those pieces were moved with the plan to be able to have the cap space to make things work with Brook Lopez. And once those deals were kind of locked in, it was hard to navigate away from them. It's kind of a messy situation, unfortunately, but they did pivot, absorb Patty Mills. They got Jock Landale on what was actually a really impressive deal, actually, all things considered. 4 years, $32 million, only the first year guaranteed. That, I know it's a bit underwhelming because we thought, oh man, Brook Lopez might be coming to Houston, and you walk away with what you get in Jock Landale. Obviously, he's not Brook Lopez, but he had a really fantastic postseason run with the Phoenix Suns, and he's a guy that is going to be a very serviceable backup to Alperen Sengun, a guy who gives them a bit of a different look at the 5 spot. Both he and Sengun are kind of working on their 3 ball at this point, so hopefully one of them can kind of get that going a bit more consistently and give the Rockets a bit more of a 5-out spacing threat from the 5 spot without giving up too much size or too much of the screening presence and the rolling presence that those guys kind of provide from that position. So it's not Brook Lopez, unfortunately. But as I'm kind of settling into the moves that the Rockets made, again, I think that because of how the offseason has gone so far to this point, I don't want how today went to kind of overshadow how good the offseason has been so far with hiring Udoka. They killed it in the draft. The Fred VanVleet contract was an absolute steal. That's an A++ contract and player. So I think overall we should still probably feel pretty good about how things are going.
And Jock Landale, he's an active big man.
Yeah. Okay. Very active.
Very active. That's a good thing. His perimeter game is a work in progress, but he's a good active big man who doesn't need a lot of touches, good defense, rebounder, can get you some, I think it's a backup. That removes any concerns from Rocket fans about if Brook Lopez comes in, who would start. Okay, Alpy's going to start, period. Let's move on. There's your backup 5 rotation. Alperen Sengun, Jock Landale, and then on occasion, if needed, maybe have Jabari sometime at the 5. So I think it's a good move, especially with only one of the first year guaranteed out of the 4. Great, smart move. Not so smart move. The one I
know, man. It's hard to even like wrap your mind about it because here's the problem. And look, I'm so torn because let me put my hands together. I gotta cook, Chris. Look, I'm torn because sometimes this front office makes really smart moves when it comes to contract structure, decision making, all that, and then other times make really puzzling moves. And the decision to extend Kevin Porter Jr. was incredibly puzzling. The contract that they actually got him on, absolutely fantastic. It's a steal. It's great value. A lot of baked in provisions to allow them to opt out, at various points. They can basically cut ties with KPJ whenever they want. It's a great contract. It's incredibly team weird because had they just let Kevin Porter Jr. go to restricted free agency this offseason, then they would have had $6 million less on their books. And they might not have had to make some of the moves that they did with some of their other young talent to offload to increase their salary cap space to be able to make the moves that they wound up wanting to make. Right. So
great point.
That was kind of puzzling. And then in a similar line of thinking to that, they kind of like bid against themselves on Dillon Brooks. Like, I don't know who else was out there getting ready to offer Dillon Brooks 4 years, $80 million.
There was no one.
Yeah, I feel very confident in saying there was no one, right? I feel very confident in saying the Rockets were probably the only team willing to go that far with Dillon Brooks. There may have been a couple other suitors for him, but it probably would have been MLE territory money. It's kind of shocking to me. It almost feels as if they had like this preordained agreement with Dillon Brooks that they just didn't want to, renege on, that they had this vision and, maybe it was a slight overpay. But I do think that in the aftermath of the Daryl Morey era, Rafael Stone has kind of prided himself on being the antithesis to Daryl Morey, right? As far as being player friendly and not viewing players as assets and really, trying to take care of his guys and all that stuff. And maybe this was just another feather in the cap there as far as, okay, well, we kind of already had this deal agreed upon with Dillon Brooks. We think we can get him at this value, even if there's no other teams that are bidding for him. We're not going to try and like lowball him all of a sudden, but it is frustrating because I feel like they could have easily gotten Dillon Brooks either on less years or less money than what they did. And I've warmed up the idea of Dillon Brooks as a player. I think he can bring a lot to this Rockets team, both on and off the court. There is this there's this perception about him from his time with Milwaukee that I'd actually like to push back on here a little bit, in that my understanding of the situation is actually not so much that the Grizzlies didn't want him back, and more that he didn't want to go back to Memphis because the culture there is not great. Case in point.
Say that again. The culture there is not great.
Culture there is not great.
Yes. Let me stop you for a moment, my man.
Sure.
Rocket fans, the family folks here of Let's Talk Houston Rockets. No, I mentioned Dillon Brooks a few weeks ago for the Rockets. I got just lit up. Oh, no, KG, Chris. No, he's a horrible fit. No. Don't. It's a mistake. Okay. Dillon Brooks will be a Rocket.
Yep.
His three-point shooting has to improve. Obviously, he's got to improve. I'm leaning on one thing. Coach Ime Udoka is the new sheriff in town with the Rockets. He is going to establish his culture. This is not the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't care what they let you do or what happened in Memphis. That stuff won't fly here. I think Dillon Brooks, okay, coach, I'm in. Let's do that. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to win. Some of that brand stuff, poking the bear, all that other kind of stuff, whatever. The 4 years Rockets given him surprised me because I thought he was in a kind of a mode of he has to prove himself around the league that he's still a legit NBA player.
Now, I do want to add in here, Chris. It wasn't so much the culture in Memphis as it relates to Dillon Brooks. Like, obviously, he's a bit eccentric, right? He talks a lot of trash, the whole LeBron James poking the bear, all of that. But, you know, at the end of the day, you kind of appreciate that from a player who has the fire, the intensity to want to, you know, every single night, right? Go out there, guard the best player. And sometimes you're going to talk smack and sometimes you're going to get cooked by the other guy, right?
Right.
And, you know, that while hopefully maybe Ime Udoka is able to kind of rein that in, that aspect of Dillon Brooks' personality a little bit, maybe get him, you know, to be a little bit more professional, but still kind of temper that fire a little bit, but still let him be him, right? He's an all NBA caliber defender. He's a guy that brings an edge, a toughness, a grittiness to a team. Absolutely. That kind of enforcer type mentality that the Rockets haven't had in quite some time on this team. It goes back to more so like obviously the Ja Morant stuff, a lack of accountability kind of in that locker room in Memphis. They had a lot of talent and they won a lot of games, but there were guys alongside Dillon Brooks that weren't super happy about that situation over there. And so I know Memphis made it look like the situation was they didn't want him back. They were done with him, but that was their way of kind of spinning things publicly. Whereas behind the scenes, the understandings have been a little bit different.
You know, Dillon Brooks plays with toughness. Yep. One of his things he's to tamper down is picking up bad fouls early in games. He's trying to be so physical. He picks up 2 fouls in the first 4 minutes of the game. That limits him for half, basically. But for sure, the first quarter, he's got to be smarter than that. Learn to play physical defense and read the officials, read the referees and how they're going to call a game. They're going to call it tight early, then do things differently, but still maintain that toughness, that physicality, that enforcer role that the Rockets have lacked for a while. As you said, as I believe it was H-Town's finest said, so they have that now. I'm going to give you your GM. Give me the starting 5 as of July 1st for the Rockets. Mr. Stone, Mr. Jackson Gatlin, Rafael Stone.
Well, if I was Rafael Stone, then I'd probably make a crack right now about how that's actually Ime's decision to decide the starting 5, and that I just find the guys and then I hand them off to Ime to do what he will with them. No, so if I'm Ime Udoka and I'm establishing the starting 5 right now, I think it's pretty clear. It's going to be Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., Alperen Şengün.
Yes,
that is as simple as it gets. And I think that starting 5 provides some really interesting opportunities, right? And I think the other side of things, and I think you briefly mentioned this, right? The losing out on Brook Lopez, there was going to be a pretty significant question mark about how the Rockets were going to balance their roster if they did get Brook Lopez and they also still had Alperen Sengun. Do you run those two guys together as a double big lineup for stretches of the game? Who gets the starting role? Who's the finisher at the end of games? That would have caused, some question marks about the direction of how they wanted to balance those two guys. But it would have been a good problem to have on your hands. Now you have less of a good problem because Alp is still your de facto starter, and Jock Landale is now your second string center right behind him with, like you said, Jabari Smith Jr. playing some spot minutes at the five, some five out spacing, small ball five, whatever you want to call it. I think that starting five has a lot of interesting possibilities. And just the sole additions of Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks give you two guys who are easily playoff caliber rotation guys, playoff caliber starting pieces that elevate your defense a considerable margin. We know that Jabari Smith Jr. is a good defender or can be a good defender. He still needs to grow up a little bit, mature a little bit. There were moments last year where he would get caught, over helping or making bad decisions defensively, not for lack of effort, but just because he didn't know any better. He was a rookie, but he projects to be a fantastic defender. So that's 3+ defenders that you have in your starting lineup now. Assuming Jalen and Sengun can at least be at a place where they're not just complete negatives on the defensive side of the basketball, that lineup should be able to be pretty decent defensively. And then also it has a lot of potential on the offensive side. You've got a floor general now in Fred VanVleet to really orchestrate and run that offense. I think every player on the roster is going to benefit from his addition, but I think Jalen Green is actually going to be the guy who benefits the most from adding Fred VanVleet. Think about the number of times this past season that we would see Jalen get iced out of a game where he goes with, no shot attempts, no touches for an extended, 2, 3, 4, 5 minute stretch in a given game, just because, either KPJ takes too many of his own shot attempts or other guys are not looking to get him the ball because there's not somebody on the floor really directing traffic and making sure guys understand, hey, Jalen is our number one option. We need to get him more reps. So having him out there is going to be great. Dillon Brooks is going to take the toughest defensive assignment every single night. And assuming Jabari Smith Jr. actually comes back with a better three ball this season, they'll have spacing to play around Alperen Sengun offensively, either utilizing him as a passing hub to create opportunities for other guys, or just, going through his low post game and letting him work one-on-one and collapse defenses that way. It provides a lot of different options.
Are you seeing anything regarding Jeff Green?
Regarding Jeff Green, let's see. We get Jeff Green back. Is Uncle Jeff coming back to Houston?
I'm seeing comments about it.
We're seeing Jeff Green. Let's see who's reporting Jeff Green. Oh, yep. Houston Rockets. Michael Scotto. Houston Rockets have agreed to a 1-year, $6 million deal with NBA champion Jeff Green.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Yep.
Okay. I like Jeff Green. That's a good culture pick.
That, it's the Rockets have really gone from youth to veterans in 48 hours.
Yeah. And look, Jeff Green might not be a guy that gets a ton of rotation minutes on any given night, but he's absolutely a guy that provides great veteran leadership. He's the type of vet that you want to have on the end of your bench. Look, EG was great for what he was as a Houston Rockets legend. He's easily one of the best role players in franchise history. He hit the big shot to put the Rockets up and seal Game 5 against the Golden State Warriors all the way back in 2018. Shout out to Eric Gordon for everything that he did for this Houston Rockets organization. He has a lot of love for the city of Houston, and Rockets fans should have a lot of love for him. But he was not the right veteran equipped to deal with this young group of players. It's just not it's not who he is as a player. It's not who he is as a person. It's not his personality. That's never what he brought to the table or to a locker room, unfortunately. And then same thing can be said for Boban. Boban was a ton of fun, and checking Boban into games at the end and seeing, opposing stadiums cheer and, oh my God, it's Boban. And it was so fun. That Boban was great for the vibes, but neither of those guys provided the true veteran leadership that you really want for a young team. And it kind of bleeds back into the fact that there was just very little accountability during the Steven Silas era. Guys were just kind of allowed to do whatever they wanted. That changes now, because now the Rockets have veteran guys in VanVleet, in Dillon Brooks, now in Jeff Green, guys who have been there, who have won at the highest level. Patty Mills, another great one. Absolutely. All these guys who have competed at very high levels, who can bring their wealth of knowledge to this Rockets team and really help Ime Udoka establish the new culture that he wants here in Houston and get the most out of these young guys. So to me, while it's unfortunate they missed out on Brook Lopez, this kind of still matches the direction of the organization that we were expecting them to go, which is essentially you want to add pieces that can be good ancillary pieces to the young core that you already have in place, right? Look, Josh Christopher, Garuba, KJ, Ty, those guys had some potential, but those guys were never a part of the core, the main core of guys. And right now there's a core of 7 players that the Rockets are internally very, very high on. And it's essentially all their draft picks from these past few drafts. They're high draft picks, I should say. And that includes Jalen, Şengün, Jabari, Tari, and now Amin and Cam Whitmore. Yes. Those are your 6 guys in addition to Kevin Porter Jr.
Agreed. And I think Uncle Jeff won't need a lot of touches, minutes. He could probably take the Boban role, the Boban minutes, in case of emergency type thing. He's just a good fit. I'm just kind of surprised. I mean, he got a ring now, so I'm surprised.
Well,
he didn't,
it makes sense that
to Denver, but hey, it does make sense. And he got
a $6 million deal from the Rockets. There's no way that Denver was going to give him that money. Yeah. So he got his ring. He decided to go chase the bag. I respect it. And again, he's going to provide, a lot to this Rockets locker room. He's been, with the Rockets before, albeit a brief stint during the bubble, but he was a fan favorite while he was here. Just provides a lot of experience, right? And I know that there's some comments saying that, every player who was on a championship team, is suddenly, a champion. Well, for like the guys that we're talking about that were champions, Fred VanVleet was finished second in finals MVP voting behind Kawhi Leonard.
And Jeff Green, he played.
Yeah. He played a big role for the Nuggets. He played a pretty sizable role for the Nuggets. And again, even Dillon Brooks, right? Not a champion, but Dillon Brooks is a guy who's been the starting small forward on a Grizzlies team that has been at the top of the Western Conference for the last 3 seasons. So there is a lot of experience between all the additions that they've added. Patty Mills, another guy, right? A lot of experience with the Spurs, a great resume in his own right. I think that the more that I sit here and think about it, while today's moves feel a little, I think it's 2 parts, Chris. I think they feel a little bit underwhelming because of what we thought the Rockets might be getting in Brook Lopez. But then I think it also stings a little bit because, and I've talked about this ad nauseum in various places, as fans, you get attached to players on the team, right? Mm-hmm. You get attached to a guy like KJ Martin or Ty Washington or Josh Christopher, Usman Garuba, and you think, oh, well, this guy could be great. He might be great one day. The Rockets are out of runway. They don't have more time to experiment and test things out and give 10, 15, 20 minutes a night to some of these young guys to see if they might turn in to something. And it's unfortunate because they really kind of fumbled things this past season by prioritizing Daishen Nix all year instead of giving Ty Washington more run.
Yes.
Yeah. By prioritizing Kevin Porter Jr. for the past 2 years, by not doing more creative things with Usman Garuba, by not giving KJ Martin the starting spot and just moving Eric Gordon to the bench and seeing what he could do as the starter for an entire season. Like there was a lot of areas where, unfortunately, due to mismanagement from Stephen Silas and the approach to the roster these past 2 years, the Rockets didn't really do a good job of experimenting and really seeing what they had with some of these players. We still really don't even know what they have in Alperen Şengün because they never really leaned into his gifts as a playmaker or utilizing him as an offensive hub to create easier opportunities for other guys. Everything Şengün does on the floor seems kind of like it's done in spite of the coaching staff historically. So they've identified the pieces that they are internally very high on moving forward. They've churned the roster over. They've gotten rid of all the young guys that they didn't think were worth keeping around. And it's unfortunate for some of them. I do wish them the best moving forward. I think Ty Washington still has a bright NBA career ahead of him. Same for Usman Garuba. Josh Christopher in the right situation might be able to be something for a team somewhere someday. And then KJ Martin, right? Another guy. But KJ was also a guy that was going to be paid. He's going into the final year of his deal. He's going to hit restricted free agency. Somebody's going to offer him a good chunk of money next summer. And the Rockets don't want to be the team that has to match that contract and then try and find a home for him. They got 2 second-round picks back for him. They thought they might be able to get a first when he was reportedly in trade talks this past season. So you settle for the 2 seconds. Maybe you lose a little bit of value there. But this was always going to be the offseason where tough decisions had to be made. And that's exactly what we're seeing the front office do right now.
And Coach Udoka said this at Monday's presser. about basically practice is going to be more competitive. We're going to bring in vets. We're going to hold guys accountable. Roles will change. What was done in the past will not be done anymore. So subtle, I would say shots, but you're seeing the difference in him and compared to Steven Silas. Going back to the comment you made earlier regarding Ime did not believe James Harden fit his role, and basically, in how you kind of phrase it, put his foot down and held firm with Rafael Stone and saying, no, Rafael, I don't want James Harden here. Steven Silas would not have done that. I think Steven Silas looking at Daisha Nix, Ty Washington, Eric Gordon. He kind of, the way it looked, he did not say to Rafael, no, Rafael, I don't want to give Eric minutes. No, Rafael, I don't believe Daisha deserves these minutes. He didn't, stand up to Rafael and say, no, I'm not doing that. Well, Coach Udoka has no problem saying that. And you're seeing a difference in the vets he's bringing in to fit his philosophy, the personnel he wants. He said it. This comedy also said at the presser, I have yet to miss the playoffs. I'm not sure if the moves he's made thus far will get the Rockets in the play-in. They're getting closer, though. I'm inching up my win predictions to get them closer, but I'm not sure ready to say that just yet. But, of course, it's still July 1st. But the Rockets are better off, in my opinion, with the moves they've made so far than they were with last year's roster. Now, we can talk about from a fan perspective. We're not fans, okay? We respect KJ. I wish KJ well. I wish Ty well. Jacob, hey, they weren't going to be long-term answers here. They weren't. You can root if you are such a fan of those players, you can root for them with their new teams. That won't stop you. You can still support them, follow them with their new teams. But this Rocket team has moved in a different direction. Coach Udoka is in charge now. Different guys are in charge. He has different expectations than Steven Silas. So we're going to see how it all plays out. So I want to back up to some of the folks. The KJ Martin move to the Clippers. Were you surprised?
A little bit, honestly, because it kind of felt like KJ may have dodged, like for a little while there, it felt like maybe KJ was going to dodge the roster churn and that they were going to maybe hold on to him. But I think it showcases the fact that the Rockets are very bought in on their new direction, their new vision. When you look at the depth chart, it's very clear. We looked at the starting five: Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., and Alperen Sengun. And then you look at their immediate backups, right? Amin Thompson is going to be your backup point guard. Kevin Porter Jr. is your backup 2. Tari Eason / Cam Whitmore are your backups 3 and 4. And then Jock Landale is your backup 5, right? And
pause right there.
Sure.
You didn't even name Patty Mills.
Yep.
Okay, you named 5 other guys. Rockets are 10 deep right there.
Yep.
Right there.
And they've still got Patty Mills. They've still got Jeff Green.
So that's 12 solid players right there with a good mix of youngsters with talent and old school vets. It's a good mix. I think it's a promising mix. Keep going, my man.
No, it is a good mix. You're absolutely right. And that's exactly what the Rockets sought to do this offseason. They wanted an infusion of veterans to really kind of help buoy all the young guys. I think that the Rockets, you look at all the different moves that they made, right? Ime Udoka is going to add X number of wins just because he's a significantly better coach than what the Rockets had before with Steven Silas. You look at Fred VanVleet, that's going to add a certain number of wins. You look at Dillon Brooks, that's going to add a certain number of wins. You look at just all the veterans that they added together, right? And having that presence in and around the young guys, that's going to add a certain number of wins. The biggest variable and the one that we don't know, the biggest question mark at this point is how significant are the steps forward that the other young pieces on this Rockets roster take, right? I think it's a two-part equation here. It's how big of a step forward do guys like Jalen and Sengun and Jabari and Tari take? Then the next question becomes, how NBA ready are guys like Amin Thompson and Cam Whitmore? Are they brought along a bit more slowly? Is Amin Thompson getting 15, 20 minutes a night and being brought along very slowly with low expectations out of the gate? Or does he pick it up pretty quick and it's like, oh, wow, he's ready to go? Same thing for Cam Whitmore. And then the third part of it is, how does Kevin Porter Jr. respond to no longer being the point guard of this team?
Yes.
KPJ, for a long time, just embraced the identity, the role, the leadership that came with being the point guard of this team. We saw him on kind of his teacher's pet behavior a little bit at Ime Udoka's introductory press conference. We know that he traveled with the team to the draft combine in Chicago with Rafael Stone and with Ime Udoka. We know that he's kind of been honestly sucking up to the coach a little bit. And it's possible that was happening because he felt, the winds of change blowing and that he knew that his role might be different, alluding back to another comment that Udoka had at the introductory press conference for the rookies, was that players might be playing different roles than they're accustomed to this season. And I think that when I heard that, my immediate thought was Kevin Porter Jr. and that his role was no longer going to be the point guard of this team, that his role was going to be back to his natural position of playing as a 2/3, a dynamic scoring guard who can create as a secondary creator, but his primary role on the floor is to score. Because when Kevin goes out there with the express intent to score the basketball, he can be pretty good at it. Like he's a pretty solid 2 guard. And that's why for a long time, it's kind of felt like his best role might be that 6th man supercharged sub off the bench, where you just let him go into a game for 15, 20, 25 minutes a night. And if he's got it going, awesome. You ride the hot hand and you let him cook and get his 15, 20, 25 points off the bench. But if he's struggling, if he's chucking and if shots aren't falling or if the defense slows him down on a given night, then cool. Maybe you peel back his minutes a little bit, but getting him in that role off the bench and getting him to buy into a different role is going to be, I think, a pretty big task for Ime Udoka. And it'll be interesting to see how that pans out, because he could respond well to it and he embraces the role and he looks really, really good playing off the bench, or he might hate it and he might be, out the door before the halfway mark of the season if he doesn't accept the new role and understand that he is no longer the point guard of this team.
Agreed. And it's up to Scoot. His role is changing. He'll be coming off the bench. He won't have to run the show. For his first 2 years here, I'm the Rockets point guard. Well, that's no longer the case. So will he accept that new role? I think he could flourish in that new role as a 6th man, as a scorer, as a guy who just get shots. Still be within the offense, obviously. I think he can shine in that role. So
KG, am I able to highlight one more thing on the KPJ front?
Yes.
I want to point out again, I've tried to impress upon people the idea that Kevin Porter Jr. is an incredibly talented basketball player. I've never said that he wasn't. He has an abundance of talent. It's just about molding and pointing that talent in the right direction. I think the Rockets, at the end of the day, were trying to fit a square peg into a round hole by making him the point guard. Yes. And they had a vision for it. I could understand it in theory. I was even on board with it for the first season. I was like, you know what? Awesome. You've got 2 years where you're going to be the worst team in the NBA, probably. Let's do it. Let's run an experiment. Awesome. It was the sunk cost fallacy of, we've got to commit to it, stay committed to it, we're going to make this work. Like doubling down on it for the second season was where it became a bit of an issue this past year. But I would like to highlight and point out just how good Kevin Porter Jr. looked in that first half season that he was with the Rockets, back when they still had John Wall playing before they shut him down, and how good KPJ looked playing off of a legitimate point guard in John Wall, back when he was playing the role that he was accustomed to playing for his entire career. I'd also like to point out the stretches where DJ Augustine or Dennis Schroeder would actually share the court with Kevin Porter Jr.
Great point.
And why he looked so good with those guys. Because at the end of the day, KPJ and Jalen Green are the same exact player. They're dynamic 2 guards who are bucket getters, who can score at a high level, all 3 levels on the floor. And that's also why when you would see those 2 guys play with each other, the games where Jalen would pop off and look great, 25, 30 plus, he'd look great. And Kevin still has other tools in his bag, be it when he's locked in on defense or his playmaking, what have you. Kevin has other ways to impact the game right now compared to Jalen. Jalen's playmaking is getting better. His defense needs work, but the issue becomes, when Jalen has it going, Kevin can kind of take a backseat to Jalen and say, all right, he's got it going. Cool. I'm going to focus on defense. I'm going to focus on playmaking, all of that. And some games that wouldn't even happen. Sometimes that's when we would get into the rut where Jalen would have it going and Kevin was like, 4 of 17. And it's like, okay, Kevin, like you need to be playmaking, not trying to get your buckets because Jalen is clearly on fire tonight. You need to be facilitating the ball to him. The inverse of that would be the games where Kevin got going and he had it going and he was cooking and he was having a fantastic scoring night. And then Jalen would get kind of lost. Jalen would kind of sink back into the shadows and be like, oh, well, Kevin's got it. Cool. Yeah. I'm just not going to be a part of the team, or I'm going to be content to let my twin cook. Like that was basically the dynamic to where I felt like Jalen didn't want to like overstep his boundaries or didn't want to command the ball, especially if Kevin was having a good night. Ultimately, I kind of felt like Kevin's good games were at times a bit detrimental to Jalen because it's really hard to have that dynamic of two guards kind of work in the backcourt. We saw it for years with basically Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, right? 2 score first mentality guards. And they made it work sometimes, but there were plenty of times that it didn't look good.
Have you heard any more details on what they are getting back in return for Jacob?
Jacob, it looks like, was just part of the sign and trade for Dillon Brooks. So there isn't anything in addition coming back from that. I believe the situation is just they just needed a way to offload Josh Christopher's salary for the moves that they wanted to make with their cap space. And so in order to do that, they instituted the sign and trade with the Grizzlies, and with the Grizzlies doing a sign and trade, offering to do the sign and trade gives the Rockets a certain level of flexibility. And it also generated a pretty substantial traded player exception for the Grizzlies. So as like a, as a way to facilitate that, they also included Josh Christopher, which is actually, I think when you look at it, it's actually the Grizzlies agreeing to take on Josh Christopher without the Rockets having to give anything back. Like, for example, the Atlanta trade where the Rockets got rid of Ty Washington and Usman Garuba, they had to include 2nd-round picks and cash to make that trade work because the Hawks were willing to accept the salaries of those 2 players and free up the cap space for the Rockets. So for the Grizzlies, they were willing to accept Josh Christopher and his salary cap hold so that the Rockets could have the money to, make these subsequent moves that they did, absorbing Patty Mills, making the Jock Landale deal, all of that stuff.
The hate from some folks on Dillon Brooks is amazing. Well, it's not amazing. It's interesting. Dillon Brooks in the starting lineup for the Rockets of Fred, Jalen, Al P, and Jabari. It's probably the 5th option. Okay, agreed?
Yeah, agreed.
So if he's the 5th option, he will not take 15 shots a game. And they won't be 15 questionable shots a game either. So as long as he takes good shots and shots within the offense and stick to defense, he'll be fine.
It's a big if though, right?
And that's where Coach Udoka is going to come in and say, exactly. This is what we need from you. Because if you take bad shots, I'll sit you down. My thing with Dillon Brooks coming to the Rockets is the contract, the 4-year contract, and that it's guaranteed. That's my biggest issue with it. Shot selection, you can correct that. You can correct shooting form. A lot of things you can fix. But a 4-year deal that's guaranteed, that part right there is what I shake my head at. But as a 5th option on offense and starting 5, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and again, hopefully Udoka is the guy who can rein him in a little bit. Clearly, Taylor Jenkins never was able to make that happen in Memphis, and that goes back to, I think, when you look at maybe some of the culture issues and the fact that maybe Taylor Jenkins didn't have as firm control of that locker room as some would think. That bleeds into, right? You have a guy, you have Ja Morant, you have Desmond Bane, you have Triple J. There's no reason for Dillon Brooks to have been taking some of the shots that he would take with Memphis on the floor, and that has to have been part of some of the conversations that he had with the Rockets about the vision and identity and the direction for this team. Ime Udoka strikes me as the no-nonsense kind of guy, right? Yeah. He's the guy that is going to be able to sit Dillon Brooks down and say, look, man, if you start taking bad shots, you're getting benched. Simple as that, right? So, and Dillon Brooks doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who's going to be content with getting benched and not playing minutes, right? He's a competitor. He's a fighter. He wants to be out there winning games. He wants to compete. big time love of the game, all of that. And so if he needs to adapt and adjust his approach to kind of match what Ime Udoka wants for him and for his role here on the Houston Rockets, I think he can do that, right? And if anything, that should give him more juice defensively, right? To be able to be the best version of himself on that side of the basketball with less obligations offensively other than just hit your open shots when you're open. But our first, second, third, and fourth options are going to be all the other guys on the court. You're the fifth option. You shoot when you're open, and that's pretty much it. Don't force anything.
Agreed. And we've touched on it earlier in the show regarding the length of the contract. Really, who were the Rockets bidding against for Dillon Brooks? So the length of the contract, the amount, we can question that. We have questions about that. But let me say this regarding he's the fifth option, and at some point he's going to have to shoot and blah, 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 blah. Okay, and let me be clear on this. He is not what I'm going to say, comparing him to, but Jackson. Golden State Warriors won 4 championships so far, and I think they're done. Draymond Green is the fifth option. How many times did he shoot the ball?
Not a ton.
As the fifth option, and you got Steph, Clay, other guys who can shoot, Wiggins, all that, et cetera, et cetera. And yet somehow he did not take 10, 12, 15 shots a game.
It is my turn to play devil's advocate, though. It's because he was the one running the offense. That's the difference.
So at times, yes. But at times, maybe Coach Udoka can do the same thing and say, all right, Dillon, this is what I want you to do, man. Be at the high post, above 3-point line. You can facilitate, pass it around, and cut.
I think the cutting is going to be the big one for Dillon Brooks. I think utilizing him, right, and that's where you get into some creative stuff with Alper and Şengün, right? If you have Alp running at the high post, if you've got guys like Jalen and Dillon Brooks cutting with shooters lined up in Jabari and Fred VanVleet to kind of space the floor, I think there's some interesting stuff that can be done there to where Dillon Brooks might still be able to get his 8, 9, 10 shot attempts a game, but instead of him taking contested middies and ill-advised 3-pointers, he's getting 5 or 6 shots right at the rim. Yeah, layups and dunks and free throws, right? Shots that are high percentage that you feel good about him taking. And that's going to be, the onus is going to be on Ime Udoka to make sure that Dillon Brooks still feels involved and still feels like a valuable member of the team offensively without necessarily minimizing his role, but changing his shot diet to where he can be a more efficient player. And that's a pretty tall task.
Agreed. And if you're new to this edition of Let's Talk Houston Rockets, welcome. Your opinions are welcome. That's part of the live stream. That's what they're for. But if I see you commenting, it's also, I can respond to your comments and your questions and your criticisms. That's what I'm here for. So give your opinion, but I'm going to give mine too.
I will.
And Jackson will as well.
Terrible. No, I'm kidding.
So, I mean, that's what the interaction is here. That's what this show is for, is to interact with the audience. Good, bad, or indifferent. Some opinions I think are just hilariously wrong. But you are entitled to your opinion, just like I am. Hey, that's the fun of this show. And I'm not a fan of the Rockets. I cover the Rockets. Okay? Long time folks who follow this show, and I've been doing this a long time. We're going to segue. For a brief moment, you found out about this after the presser, that I am a Detroit Pistons fan, and I have been since '86. But when we were talking to Arthur Thompson after the presser, and we had our Detroit Piston moment, and you were surprised to hear that I was a Pistons fan, but it was good. So that's all. But that's who I'm a fan of. I cover the Rockets. I've covered the Rockets a long ass time, longer than some of y'all have been around.
It's okay, guys. It's okay, guys. Yeah. I'm a Rockets fan.
So it's all good. Today, some of these moves are good, or they were interesting. We were asked this. We kind of touched on it earlier. Starting 5. We've said, who are the backup 4 or 5 guys for the 9-10 man rotation, in your opinion? I think we said that too, pretty clearly.
Yeah, you want me to roll through them again?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just for anybody who missed it earlier, right? Your starting 5 is very clearly decided at this point. It's going to be Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., and Alper and Şengün. And even though I feel very confident in saying those are the starting 5, I will say, based on some of what Ime Udoka said, right, maybe somebody really outperforms another guy in training camp. Maybe Jalen Green doesn't come to training camp as serious as he needs to be, and Kevin Porter Jr. looks like the better 2 guard. maybe that's a decision that Ime Udoka makes down the line. And, again, iron sharpens iron, and these guys are going to have to earn their spots. Nothing is going to be given anymore. Udoka said that at the press conference, right?
He sure did.
Jalen was given his 30-plus minutes as a rookie, no matter how bad he was. Jabari was given his 30-plus minutes tonight, no matter how bad he looked, even though Tari looked like the better rookie for about 2/3 of the year. And Tari was getting less minutes. So I think moving forward, it very much is going to be whoever the best player is, plays. And if you're getting outplayed by somebody else lower on the depth chart, that guy might take your starting spot. If you're not putting your best foot forward every single game, every single practice, every single night. And so I think your starting five looks like it's going to be VanVleet, Jalen, Dillon Brooks, Jabari, and Şengün, with your backups being Amin Thompson at point, KPJ at the 2, Cam Whitmore at the 3, Tari Eason at the 4, and then, I apologize, Jae'Sean Tate at the 3, Cam Whitmore as your third string 3. I don't expect Cam Whitmore to play right away out of the gate. Tari at the 4, and Jock Landale at your 5 spot. Tate was actually the guy we missed earlier, Chris. Right, I knew we were missing somebody on this roster. The Rockets internally love Jae'Sean Tate. And I know a lot of Rockets fans are kind of torn down the middle about what Jae'Sean Tate brings to the table, but he kind of gives you a lot of the similarities that Dillon Brooks gives you, right? There's some questions with the shooting, but high IQ players, good defenders. Tate probably gives you a little bit more playmaking. Dillon Brooks is the bigger body, better defender at this point. But you kind of have two of those guys now on the roster, and maybe they make a move. Maybe Jae'Sean Tate isn't actually here on opening night, but it's a lot of depth on this Rockets roster now, and that's the important part.
And you named 6 guys without naming Patty Mills and Jeff Green.
Yep.
So the Rockets bench has improved. Looks much better on paper than last season, without question. Jae'Sean might be traded to free up some minutes for others. But the whole point, as Coach Udoka said, you said it as well, is to upgrade the talent, upgrade the competition in practice, which would hopefully lead to better performances during the games, which will result in wins. And that's the goal, is to win. It's not to be friends, play your favorite players. Well, he did something, whatever. It's to win. And phase 2 has begun. Truly, phase 2 has begun today in these last few hours with the moves and the vets they bring in. Many of us thought, the Rockets would bring in 2 vets. Most like 2 vets. They brought in more than 2 vets.
I thought it was going to be 3. I'll be honest, Chris.
I thought
I projected 3. I thought they were going to bring in a guard, a wing, and a big, and they went further than that, right?
Yes. But I think this is the stamp of Ime Udoka on this team. The question, it was mentioned earlier, long time during the show. What do you think? The fact that the Rockets, Rafael, traded or will trade Ty, Jacob, Oos so quickly, is that a bad look for Rafael Stone? And he drafted them, and now they're gone so soon.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad look. I think it's frustrating because some of these guys didn't get a chance to really showcase themselves, and that part is frustrating because from an asset management perspective, you really didn't get a chance to see what these guys had. And I think that does reflect poorly on the front office, but it reflects more poorly on their inability to figure out a true direction for this team during the 2 years that Steven Silas was running the helm of the tank, because they were kind of rudderless during those 2 years, right? It didn't really feel like they had a direction, no hierarchy, no accountability, all of that stuff. As far as the assets themselves, it's kind of like one of those situations where it's not like if you hadn't made the Ty pick, or if you hadn't made the Josh Christopher or Garua picks, you'd still have that pick today to use in like a trade. No, like you had to make those picks when you made them, right? It's unfortunately, I use this analogy all the time. It's the driving a new car off the lot situation, right? You drive the new car off the lot, it immediately depreciates 35-40% of its value the moment you take it off the lot after buying it. That's the issue with first round draft picks in the NBA is, once you make that selection and that first round draft pick, which is a shiny first round draft pick, it could be anything. It could be a mystery box. It could be a superstar. It could be a piece that we trade for an upset star player, whatever. Once you draft that player, it becomes a player. It becomes a rookie that you have to sink hours and time and development reps into, and have to commit rotation minutes to, and maybe they pan out, maybe they don't pan out. But like we said earlier, the Rockets are just out of runway. They don't have any more runway to experiment with these kind of afterthought rookies, right? Guys who might still be something someday, but they've got so many other more promising rookies, or sorry, I can't say rookies, young players ahead of those guys in the pecking order, that they need those minutes committed to those guys. And then elsewhere, the other veterans that they're bringing in are going to soak up the rest of the rotation minutes. And that's just, unfortunately, that's just life. So I don't think it necessarily reflects poorly on Rafael Stone. Unfortunately, I think what it says is that at the end of the day, the draft is kind of a crapshoot. Maybe one of these guys, maybe some of these guys will hit further down the line. Maybe Ty Washington becomes a really amazing, high quality point guard. But we have to, at this point, kind of trust that whatever the Rockets saw behind the scenes in practices, his G League footage, the actual, brief amount of time that he got in the games, I still think that Ty is poised to have a really strong NBA career, but they had to make a decision. And it's not necessarily a gamble, but they had to make choices to move on from some of these guys, to open up minutes, to open up roster spots. You can't just keep trotting out rosters every single year that have a combined average age of 20. You just can't do it, right? You need veterans, you need older players, you need guys to help establish a culture and a hierarchy and all that stuff. And unfortunately, some of these guys are just consequences of the rebuild at this point.
That's where I was going to go. This is the shift. And I think Tillman's thinking, the organization's thinking, phase 2 beginning. Look, they could, if Tillman would have said, I'm good with losing for another year, another 2 years, he could have played Oos, could have played Ty this season, could have played all the youngsters and let them grow and see what they have and all that. But Tillman wants to win. Start winning now. Tillman wants phase 2. Tillman made the change in coaches because he wants to win more games this season. Well,
and Chris, it's also not, and I don't want to make it out to where it sounds like Tillman is the boogeyman here for wanting more wins, because unfortunately the Rockets, as a result of the Chris Paul, Russell Westbrook swap, they don't own their picks moving forward. And it starts this next season, right? So the Rockets had a brief window where they could tank and be bad and own their draft capital. And that's exactly what they did. And they walked away with 3 really high level players in Jalen Green, Jabari Smith Jr., and Amin Thompson as a direct result of their decision to bottom out and be bad 3 straight years in a row. This next year, that pick is owed to Oklahoma City. It's got top 4 protections on it, but I don't know about you guys. I'm not trying to sit there and sweat about whether or not the Rockets are going to win a coin flip to keep their pick after being yet again one of the worst teams in the NBA for a 4th straight season. The Jalen Green draft was stressful as all hell going into the lottery because we didn't know what was going to happen. And had the Rockets lost that pick, it would have set the rebuild back quite a substantial margin from going from what was pick number 2 in Jalen Green all the way down to what would have been pick 18. 18. That would have been a brutal way to start the rebuild. So even though Tillman is at a point where the Rockets internally committed to 3 years of being bad, they definitely want to be a better team this next season. They do want to win some games. I don't think there is necessarily a win mandate being placed on Ime Udoka. I don't think Tillman is going to be breathing down the necks of the coaching staff and front office saying, if we don't win this number of games, heads are going to roll. They just want to see progress and steps in the right direction. They want to see the young guys, and they want to see at least the beginning picture of a vision for how this team can get back to being a contender one day. Because for the last 2 years, that picture hasn't existed. The picture has basically been, we hope Jalen's a star. We hope Alp's a star. We hope Jabari's a star. Like, that's it. There hasn't been a cohesive vision in place for how they can get from point A to B to C to D, E, F, G in how to become title contenders again. This offseason, though, gives you those first steps in that direction. They're adding the veterans. They've got a good supporting cast around these young guys now. And now it's up to Ime Udoka to deploy it this next season and nurture the development of the young guys while also balancing the impact of the veterans to have a better team on the floor.
Just thank you to H-Town's Finest for the contribution. And let's answer. I mean, right now, we're not going to be held to it because I'm still kind of thinking about how many wins I'm going to have them improving. But, JG, how many games do you predict the Rockets will win this season, this coming season?
If they don't make any other moves, just looking at what we have right now after today and adding Ime Udoka, I'm going to say 35 wins.
Okay. Initially, before everything, signings and deals, I was leaning toward, I'm going to say 32. That's where I started with 32. And my top is 36. So we're close, 35 and 36. So that's a 10 to 14 game improvement. That's damn good. That's really good. I know some fans on last Saturday's show went up as high as 40. And one person said 44. I think that's a lot. That's a massive improvement. They will improve. They should win more, barring catastrophic injuries to key players. I think the team will definitely be better. The team was going to be better regardless because it's got a new head coach who knows what he's doing and he's holding players accountable. But now the practices are going to be more intense, more competitive. So I'm changing from 32 to say about 36. 36, and then if something changes toward the end of before the season begins, I might go a little higher. I don't see going probably above 38, but 36 I'm going to say right now.
And I think they're going to be firmly in that mix for the 9 to 11 spot in the West. I think they're going to firmly be in the mix for the play-in tournament bracket area. I think when you look at the teams that were out West this past season, in fact, I want to make sure I get this pulled up so that I get it right. Let's get here. And then I apologize. I should have had this pulled up already. So let's take a look at the teams that were, out West this past season, right? The 5 teams that didn't make the playoffs were the Mavericks, the Jazz, the Blazers, the Rockets, and the Spurs. I think I could very easily see a world where the Rockets are now clearly at the top of that pecking order, not where the Mavericks are, but like at the 4 spot essentially. So the 11th seed, or 12th seed, I guess,
And how
in
many
the
wins
Western
was that
Conference.
last year? What would that be?
That was 37 for the Utah Jazz. So right there, kind of flirting with that territory.
Mm-hmm.
And again, all it takes is one team to fumble a little bit. Maybe the OKC Thunder don't overperform expectations the way that they did this past season. They were 40 and 42. I think that surprised a lot of people seeing them in the play-in discussions. I could see the Minnesota Timberwolves being a team that blows things up at some point in the middle of the season with Karl-Anthony Towns. We know that the Blazers are looking to shop Damian Lillard, and so they're looking to figure out a Damian Lillard trade at this point. So they're probably going to be below the Rockets. I feel safe in saying the Spurs are probably going to be bottom of the conference yet again. So I think there are a number of teams here that the Rockets can be pretty confidently better than. So I'm predicting them somewhere in that 9 to 11 territory of the Western Conference, which puts them in the play-in range.
Yeah, and I think that's pretty realistic to be right around the play-in territory. Things get a break here and there, they might make the play-in. I think that'd be a positive. I'm sure. I know there'd be a positive for sure. It's a step in the direction of this team getting better. And then the next season, second season with Coach Udoka, playoffs. Third season, you continue to improve. The talent is getting this year's team, this current team, this coming team will be more talented than last season's team. That's the first goal of any young team, is to upgrade the talent than the previous roster. Mission has been accomplished so far. And then you know how things go. But Sacramento, we talked about draft picks. There are first round picks, second round picks who are out of the NBA after 3 years. Teams make mistakes on picks. Drafts are crapshoots. The Heat with their undrafted players and success they've had. Teams get into bad teams make the mistake of holding on to talent, perceived talent in their eyes too long. I don't want the Rockets, and I think Rocket fans don't want their team to get in a Sacramento King previous regime rut of going 17 years of no playoffs. Holding on to players too long. Well, if he's got one more year, this is going to be the year he turns it out. No. Okay. This team is making improvements. They're not going to, I doubt, improve 20 wins this coming season. They do great. I think Coach Udoka would be running for Coach of the Year if they go to 42 and 40. Some of the fans would say, and I saw the comment, spend all that money for 36 wins. Well,
Can I ask the chat who they would have spent the money on instead?
Right.
And what would y'all have done? I can see y'all's comments.
And also, most teams who have a lot of cap room, you know why they have a lot of cap room? Because they're bad. Very, very, very rarely is a playoff team, a championship caliber team, have cap space.
Yeah, like
I like a lot of it.
I just want to know, like who would you have spent money on if not Fred VanVleet for $40 million? Austin Reeves, guys, the Lakers were going to match Austin Reeves.
And let me say this, because that was the guy I was going to name. I'm surprised Austin Reeves and his reps did not at least get an offer from another team.
Yeah,
the deal he got to stay with the Lakers is basically what they could offer. 4 years, $56 million. I mean, we all expect, everybody pretty much knew Lakers was gonna match.
But I think that's kind of one of those situations where it got to a place where I think, especially, and I need everybody, every single one of y'all watching this right now, to pay very close attention here. We have a new NBA CBA going on right now. Teams are scared of the future financial ramifications that their teams are going to have to face. There are some teams, right? There are incredibly harsh penalties in place for teams that overspend, that go over the new second apron territory as far as their payroll is concerned. So in previous years, yeah, you might have seen 2 or 3 different teams just, Austin Reeves is a restricted free agent. Cool. Let me just throw a big fat offer sheet at him because, why not? Who cares? Let's just maybe try and get Austin Reeves. Right now, teams are being very tactical in how they are planning and plotting their future expenditures for certain players and the decisions that they ultimately want to make. So, of the teams with available cap space and the targets that they had in mind, why would the Rockets or the Spurs or the Magic or the Pacers or any other of the teams that had the cap space that could have gone out and tried to sign Austin Reeves to a really big 4-year, $80 million deal to really, try to bend the Lakers over and screw them over as far as restricted free agency goes, to force them to match that contract? Why would they put themselves in that position and miss out on other potential free agents that they know that they could get, right? It was like the worst kept secret that the Lakers were going to retain Austin Reeves no matter what. Same thing happened with the Brooklyn Nets. There's a reason Cam Johnson didn't get any offers from any other teams. There's a reason Detroit Pistons were one of the most widely reported teams that was going to be in the running for Cam Johnson. And at least my people that cover both the Pistons and Nets, the way that they've kind of explained the situations and what it looks like is Troy Weaver with the Pistons probably got the phone call from Sean Marks that said, hey, look, we're going to match Cam no matter what you offer him, right? You can offer him up to this. We're going to match it. We want to keep him at this number. So how about this? How about we send you Joe Harris and, you get a shooter, you get somebody to round out your rotation, all that, but just stay away from Cam Johnson. We'll give you this as part of a deal, and that'll be that, right? And then we don't have to bid against each other, because otherwise we're still going to win, and you walk away with nothing. Instead, now you get to walk away with Joe Harris. So at the end of the day, yeah, you could make the argument maybe the Rockets should have been in the running for Austin Reeves. But if they put themselves in the running for Austin Reeves and then the Lakers matched anyways, and then Fred VanVleet went back to the Raptors, everybody would be even more pissed, because then the Rockets would have walked away with nothing. So they needed to spend that money on somebody. They identified their number one target in Fred VanVleet, whether you like it or not, that he was their number one guy, and they got it done. And he was the best point guard available on the market. He was arguably one of the best free agents on the market, probably top 5. And the Rockets went out, identified their guy, and they got him. I think that is an absolute win for the organization, especially when you look at the terms of the deal and how team friendly it is with that the team option in year 3. I think it was an A++ move.
And say that one more time for folks who missed it earlier. But yes, the 3rd year on FVV's deal is a team option. So I think that makes his contract even better and more beneficial for the Rockets. Asleep Art, thank you very much. And my FM, I see your comment there. Thank you for the contribution, Asleep Art 11_. No one offered Dillon Brooks. We touched on that earlier. We've said it throughout. We've said it throughout this show. But no one offered Cam. No one offered Austin Reeves either. So because everyone expected the Lakers to match Austin Reeves, whatever it was. So $20 million per for Austin Reeves. Or some folks even on here wanted 4 years, $100 million for Austin Reeves to make the Lakers sweat. Sweat what? They're going to match it. Only thing with the Lakers, they could not go big the first 2 years. So they were going to just wait for a team to whatever it is. We're still going to match it. Austin Reeves said, I like LA. I love LA. They gave me a chance, an opportunity. I'm going to come here 4 years, 56. Hey, that's fair. I'm good with that.
Also, KG, I saw somebody say, I think it was a Sleep Art, right, saying that they would have used the cap space to absorb some bad contracts, right?
Yeah.
Sure, that works in theory, and I think that's absolutely a valid criticism, and that's absolutely something the Rockets should have been doing these past couple of years. They should have made more moves at the margins to utilize some of their cap space to bring in bad contracts and take on some assets and stockpile some second rounders or some late firsts. And I think that's absolutely an area where you want to criticize and should criticize the front office. But that's not necessarily the moves that they wanted to make this offseason, right? Because just saying, oh, we'll take on a bad contract, like it doesn't necessarily work. First off, point me in the direction of a bad contract that the Rockets could have taken instead of some of the signings that they made. And then also, is that a bad contract for a player that is truly unplayable? Like, would you have taken Ben Simmons back? That's a bad contract. Would you have taken Ben Simmons and taken some, firsts off the hands of the Nets if they wanted to offer that? Would you do that deal? There's a very short list of probably the players that fit the mold of still being able to contribute at a decent level to an NBA roster, but also being quote unquote a bad contract. And then also, even if they are in a bad contract, the team that's getting rid of them has to have a reason to want to get rid of them. It doesn't necessarily just have to be, oh, well, it's a bad contract, so we got to get rid of it somehow. No, they have to have a purpose for getting rid of that player. Maybe it's getting rid of them because they don't want to pay the luxury tax. Maybe it's getting rid of them because they don't want to be over that second apron. Maybe it's getting rid of them because they want to open up space to sign a different free agent or make a trade. But so you have to find a team where all of those things overlap. And then you also have to be the team first in line to make that happen. So I'm just saying, it's fun to say it out loud, to say, oh yeah, they should have just done X. Well, give me a good example of the move that they could have done. Give me a good example of the bad contract that they should have absorbed and gotten an asset for a team that it makes sense for both sides. I just don't know if there's any out there right now currently is the problem.
And Jock Landale, the first year is guaranteed, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How much is left?
The only guaranteed year.
Only guaranteed year. Jeff Green, 1 year deal. Patty Mills, what is his contract situation?
I think he's expired. I think he's got 1 year left. I will double check that though.
So you see where I'm going. So you're bringing in vets who basically are 1 year guys left. 1 year left on their contract. That's a good thing. You still have the Rockets still have flexibility.
Yep. Patty's got this next season at $7 million. So yeah. So I mean, the Rockets are going to have some, so a bunch of guys basically coming off the books if they want after this next season, right? Patty Mills, Jock Landale, and Jeff Green are all going to come off the books next offseason, and they don't have to re-up with any of them if they don't want to. So that's easily about $21 million that comes off the books starting next offseason. So whether the Rockets turn around and are able to utilize that space to make a different signing, or maybe they move another piece to open up even more space next offseason, they're kind of rolling some of that cap space to next summer when there is a much better crop of available free agents. And the best part is, that'll be after Ime's first year is done and booked, and Ime and the organization will have a much better understanding and idea of the direction that they want to go, and understanding, yes, Jalen Green can be the number one option on a championship contender. Alperen Şengün can be, he can get to a place defensively where we feel confident in him being our starting five, and we can put the right pieces around him and utilize his offensive ability to feel good about the direction of our team. Jabari is now a good three-point shooter, and he looks like a phenomenal defender, right? Amin Thompson looks like he's well on his way to being the future offensive engine of this Rockets team. This first year for Udoka, even though there is an expectation of the team to be better and to accrue more wins, it's still about Ime getting his feet wet and understanding what he has to work with moving forward. Ime's got 4 years. They signed him to a 4-year contract. Heads aren't going to roll after one season. Ime needs to understand what he is working with first to be able to know how he can establish his vision for a contender here in Houston.
Yeah, this coming season is first year of phase 2, and they're going to improve. The question for you right here, my man, when are you dropping the Locked On Rockets about these trades?
Probably sometime later tonight. I'll get behind the camera and knock it out a little bit later, but I promised you I'd be here on this show, and so we're chopping it up and having a good time going back and forth about these things. So I'll get to the LOR a little bit later on, though.
And for those who don't know, who who are new to this show because of Jackson Gatlin tweeting it out or posting it on, sharing it on his platforms. Let's see. I'm a UH alum. He's a UH alum. We've known each other how many years?
A long time. 5
Yeah,
years now?
I think 5 years or more. So there's a lot of folks that cover the Rockets. Okay. And we are part of the Rocket media community. So you might see us on other folks' platforms. I've done interviews with Kelly Eco. I've spoken with Cody Davis, Adam Spolin. So Jonathan Fagan. I know Fagan. Fagan and I have covered the Rockets probably the longest now that Berman has retired. So this is today's show of Let's Talk Houston Rockets is just another platform for Rocket fans to get info, share their opinions, whether you agree with some of them or not. That's what this platform is for. So thank you, my man, for hopping on, agreeing to be on tonight's show. When do you head out to Vegas?
Oh man. Vegas, I think I'm flying out. I think I fly out Friday. Like Friday midday, and I land midday. So I'm actually going straight from the airport in Vegas straight to UNLV to catch the first Rockets game because it tips off, I think, 4 p.m. local time. And I think I land like 2 p.m. local time. So here's to hoping and praying that there are no flight delays so that I'm not late to that first game of Summer League. It's going to be very exciting. It'll be Rockets Blazers. So we'll get to see Amin Thompson take on Scoot Henderson. Amin Thompson and Cam Whitmore taking on Scoot Henderson. So that should be a ton of fun. And of course, I'll have everybody covered for all my reactions and everything over at Locked on Rockets, Locked on NBA, all that good stuff. I'm looking forward to it, Chris. What about you?
So I won't be there till the week after. I'll be doing Big 12 Football Media Day. Yep, I do more than just cover the Rockets. So with UH football, obviously UH's first year in the Big 12, I'll be there for that on the 11th through the 13th, and headed to Vegas on the 13th through the 17th.
Nice.
But I hope everyone enjoyed our conversation. Here's on the screen again the schedule, the 4 games for sure for the Rockets in Summer League. As JG said, there you go, July 7th, game against Portland, 6 p.m. Central Time on ESPN. So, my man, thank you very much for taking time to chop it up with me, talk about the Rockets. Oh, let's remind folks who are latecomers. Starting 5, it's pretty straightforward.
Starting 5, Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, Jabari Smith Jr., Alperen Şengün.
And FM with this comment right here, your reply.
Yeah, no pick next year. I mean, it's owed to OKC. So unless the Rockets pick is somewhere in the top 4, their pick is owed to OKC via the pick swap. So now if the Rockets have a worse pick, if the Rockets are a better team than OKC next year, then the pick swap doesn't matter. OKC's not going to trade the 6th pick for the 9th pick. So, but it's just that danger territory. If the Rockets are the worst team between the two and finish with a better pick, then Oklahoma City has the option to swap for it.
Agreed. Last comment from Steve Fernandez. Rockets bench has improved. That's part of the team's talent level being upgraded. So they've done that. So that's a positive, a step in the right direction for the team. So smash the like button, become a subscriber to the Houston Roundball Review on YouTube. Thanks to Jackson for tagging a lot of us on Twitter a few days ago about who cover the Rockets. Appreciate that. This last question, we touched on a little bit. Let me pull it up. KPJ, we think he's going to come off the bench as a 6th man. And we think it's up to him whether or not he accepts that role.
Yeah, to embrace that role.
And he can excel. I think he can shine in that role if he embraces it. It's up to him. All right, my man. Thank you very much for this discussion of Let's Talk Houston Rockets here on the Houston Roundball Review on YouTube. For sports fans, not just Rocket fans, be back here tomorrow on YouTube for the 100th edition, 100th episode of Folks Talking Sports. We're going to talk more Rockets, but other sports as well. Me and Andy Yanez, another Coug alum, Willie Gibson, and a few other special guests lined up. Show could go about 90 minutes. So Folks Talking Sports also here on Houston Roundball Review, 6 p.m. start Central Time there. So Jackson, my man, you have safe travels in Vegas. We will keep in touch. And fans don't realize we all talk to each other, so we keep in touch with. We know what's going on with the Rockets. If I don't know, he knows. If he don't know, Eco knows. On and on. So we got you covered here. So a lot of different platforms for you guys to keep track of your favorite Rocket team. See you. You take care, man. We'll keep in touch. Thank you again, everybody. To all the folks who participated in the discussion. Peace.